With the announcement of Hatton's and Liverpool ceasing trading, as well as that of the Worley Model Railway Exhibition at the Birmingham NEC closing doors for the last time, invariably we're given the usual pronouncements that the hobby is dying, the demographic is too old, and that the future is bleak. I've been in the hobby for over 40 years, and I can tell you for a fact, every 10 years or so you hear this. Back in the 1960s, I was even told that there was a main story in model railway news was that the hobby was dying. And by the late 1970s, it was the #1 hobby in the UK and in Europe. Same thing happened in the mid-90s, late 80s, mid-90s. There was all kind of pronouncements that the hobby was dying, and it's still going strong. What's happened is the hobby has changed. And a lot of it has to do, I made a previous video on this about model railway and model railroad magazine publishing always gave a false impression of the hobbyist. Now, there's two things to look at here. What's selling and what isn't? Well, it seems to me that the new kids on the block, well, the relatively new kids on the block, the likes of Repedio, are selling quite well. They make high-end, expensive, well-made models that fit specific prototypes that people have a demand for. They have an excellent marketing system and department, and they brought a lot of refreshing, fun to how they market their products, even though they're obviously serious business people. They've done a great job. You have AccuScale is booming in both the UK and Ireland, producing models, although there's been some problems with quality control issues of late, and so on. Another aspect of the hobby is the second-hand market is absolutely thriving, both from a buyer's and a seller's point of view all over the world. When I say that, I mean North America, UK, Ireland, and Europe. Now, this wouldn't be the case if the hobby was dying. Other people point to the fact that clubs are not attracting members anymore, and the average age group demographic is over 60. That doesn't necessarily mean the hobby is dying. That means that the people are no longer interested in attending clubs. Now, in the past, when you joined a club, it was often to get help, expertise, tips, learn how to develop the craft of model trains, both scenery, fixing, repairing, detailing, and so on. All the myriad of exciting things that makes this hobby amazing. You don't have to do that anymore. It's all on YouTube. And if you look at the most popular channels on YouTube, you have two types. You have one that are like to do with showcasing beautiful layouts, both big and small, like the Pentilium channel. And if you have a beautiful layout that's well filmed and looks great, and you have cameras on the tracks like GoPro cameras and DJI pockets, giving close-up views of the layout as the train is moving, why bother going to exhibitions? You get a much better view of the layout and more time to examine it, pause the video, replay it, look at certain things and take inspiration and say, oh, I like the way they synced that corner. I'm going to do that. Oh, look how this guy ballasted the track. I'm going to have a go at that. You can go to a model train exhibition and you can see the layouts, but you're not going to get those kind of views and close-up examination of a layout that you're going to get on a video filmed in HD or 4K that will give close-up shots of the layout, which added a whole new dynamic to the hobby, I might add. That mini cameras have basically added a whole new dynamic to the hobby that was never there before. And you don't have to deal with big crowds, spending money on transport, screaming kids, and it's just a nice way to do it. I find it much more relaxing to sit indoors and watch videos of beautiful layouts, have a glass of wine at home, order a pizza, and just watch the beautiful layouts. And some of these videos are just stunningly made with, beautiful quality everything. And I'd rather do that than go to an exhibition. That's just how I am. Same thing is regarding techniques and tips when it comes to clubs. If you look at the second level of most popular videos regarding the hobby on YouTube, it's repairing model trains, whether it's a 00 Bill, SMT mainline, or classic model trains. There's loads of them now. They're very popular, and people find watching model trains being repaired to be an interesting part of the hobby in itself. And along with this, they're now buying second-hand models that were previously that were like more serious, should I say, models might consider to be junk, which they're not. Going right back to the 1940s, I have a Marx steam locomotive and a Gilbert steam locomotive from 1940 in my workshop waiting to be restored. And I've watched videos online that's given me the confidence to do that. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to buy a 1970s Lima model or a Hornby or an Athean blue box and bring it back to working condition. It has a tremendous sense of satisfaction in it. And it's not that difficult. This was never shown to us in the model railway press. The model railway press was always showcasing very specific prototype layouts with basically, here's what you should spend your money on. They were basically catalogs with showcasing. They got to stay in business, I understand all that. But this brings me to another aspect too, is that what YouTube has shown us is that the model railway press, as well as the exhibition circuit and the kind of models that were showcased in the past, gave a very false impression of the overall hobby, in that they showed prototype-specific layouts, say a 1940s Great Western branch line, a New England short line, something like that, everything done precisely as a kind of a museum or homage to that period of time, or railway or railroad. And then you find that, like most people have, a layout at home like I do, and they run everything in 00 and HO on it. They run all kinds of trains on it. They're not specifically locked into any one prototype. And that was never covered in the magazines in the past, and that was never reflected in the exhibition layouts. But that's what it is. A lot of people today don't model specific prototypes. A lot do, but some don't. And even if they do, if they model, an English West Country Great Western branch line in the 1940s, you can be sure they'll be running a German steam locomotive or an American switcher on that at some point, or whatever. In fact, there's a growing movement I've noticed of people making layouts that are sort of, and my own, I've tried to do that, is either an amalgamation of kind of a homage or almost like an impressionist painting of what railways are globally, and they can run anything on it then. And that's the hobby. That's where it's gone. Now, in terms of a negative future of the hobby, I think it hasn't learned from other hobbies. There's still too much focus on high-end, off-the-shelf models, DCC, with incredible detail and sound and all that bells and whistles. That's not necessarily the demographic out there that wants to get into the hobby. And when I was starting out back in the late 70s, it was Lima and Hornby, and they were robust, reliable models that were easy to fix, that didn't have tiny fiddly parts that fell off, that you could pay for with a couple of weeks' pocket money. And it was achievable. Now, one of the things I've looked at this hobby that I've often thought that if a company ever had Pete Waterman, if you're paying attention, I've often thought there was a great possibility for something like a Games Workshop model for, concept for this hobby, in that you didn't have to start specifically from scratch. Now, recently I've been looking at old modular layouts from the 70s. These are mostly built by Nock and Keebry in Germany, and Lima made some as well, where they were preformed plastic or some kind of polyurethane compound light material that had a mountain and a couple of places you put your track down on, a bridge, a river. And I used to time, and for years until very recently, I never paid that much attention. There's a channel called Railway 127, I believe, and the guy models Russian models basically. And he started a new layout using one of these old I think it's preformed layouts. And the problem with them was when I used to look at them in the old days in the catalogs, they had off the shelf kits, preformed, very plasticky looking, very, not very, very toy-like. And then I realized recently that you can take these things, put the track down, and off you go. You can scenic and detail it any way you want. And I often thought, if there's a model railroad manufacturer today, and they did it in a scale that was HO and 00. See, this is the problem too. There's too many scales. So say they did it in HO and 00, ideal scales, both using the same type of track, and created a modular system that they could say get a 4x6 layout to begin with, made of a light material with undulating countryside already on it. But that's it, an undulating form. And like the old Graham's Workshop's battle boards, then they could buy scatter scenic material, trees, buildings, and detail it in a very high level to how they want it. And then you have almost basically a modular system. Now, that is very appealing if it's approached correctly, not the way it was traditionally advertised in catalogs in the past. It saves you a lot of time with things like woodworking and plaster and those kinds of mixing compounds. The forms and shapes are there. More importantly, they will have options to expand. So you could buy module A, might be a double loop. I think that's a very important thing, that you have 2 loops. There's something very magic when you're getting out in the hobby as a kid of seeing one train pass in the other. And then with provision to connect it to another module on either side, with end modules which are probably return double radiuses or something like that. And then you can expand your layout in all directions as you develop your hobby. So you start out with something 4x6 that can be stored under a bed. And then when you get room, you can start expanding it greatly in the attic. You could have the concept of, I know Merklin have tried this, where they show you build, I still think it's too difficult the way they show, say, the tricks in Merklin system and the notch system, where they show you have to screw down these risers, and even Woodland Scenics has something similar with these kind of foam inclines and stuff like that. No, just market a very real, a very plausible blank canvas, or say a double track line that with a crossover and ability to go to the next ones on either side by 4 extra turnouts or points or whatever you want to call them. This also brings us to track. I think Code 100 is absolutely perfect. There's no reason to go to finer scales unless you're pedantic about it. And it's a given that fidelity in both wheel flanges and track just means more derailments. So Code 100 track is fine. And if you could have it again as a modular system that's pre-ballasted. Now, not like this sort of the ones that are on the market at the moment. Say something like a flexible rubber or something along those lines. A soft kind of foam plastic that again could be painted and detailed. So you'd have like straights and different lengths, and the geometry fits these modular boards. So you can literally don't have to ballast, and you can have rather than the complex expensive ones now, something that's quite simple, that the whole thing is molded at one piece with Code 100 rail. And the flanges should be similar to what like Roco was producing in the 1980s and 90s. Not too thick, not too loose, but they will stay on the track. I mean, some of the tolerances on, and also every piece of rolling stock should be able to go around a 15-inch radius. I know that, like, you'd say, okay, the longer scale length, passenger coaches look terrible on overhangs, but you have some ridiculous situations today where you can, like, some of the Walters coaches can't even get around 18 or cross over normal points. This is ridiculous. This is not good. It should be so you can, run everything on every layout. Who cares if it looks realistic, if it looks unrealistic on an 18-inch or lower radius? Who cares? Because it still runs, and if you don't like that, well, then you build a layout with a bigger radius. You solve it your own way. It shouldn't be, the hobby shouldn't cater to the elite elements of the hobby. It should cater to the every person, every man and every woman. And this also brings us to the locos and the rolling stock. Fidelity again is a problem. If a company was to bring out a HO or OO model in the style of, say, a Lima 1980s, it doesn't have to be necessarily a pancake motor or a central drive. Motors today are of incredible quality and a lot cheaper than they used to be. So even a good pancake motor can be as good as a centrally mounted flywheel motor. Fleischmann and Merkel and Trix have proven that many times over the decades. So well painted. I think that's an important thing. Very well painted. That would include things like the stainless steel frames around windows, visible, flush glazing, and a basic mechanism that can run on DC with flanges that won't derail. And you would dominate the market overnight. And you could build a whole like Games Workshop world upon that of not only all the products, but the tips on how to build things and how to paint things and how to work things, and so on. I think that's a huge aspect of the hobby that's sorely missing. It would be a winner overnight if anyone out there is a billionaire, a millionaire, and wants to invest in model trains. That's where I would have gone. That's where I would have gone with Hornby rather than going TT. I would have created a modular system in the style of Games Works, right down to a new set of track, and so on, and that would actually, and everything integrates with existing Code 100 technology. So, everything is, you can put anything on your layout, even though you may have proprietary small locos to begin with, and rolling stock, anyone can run anything. And I do think that's what, if something has killed the hobby, it is the obsession with fidelity and the obsession with technology. And they're not necessarily bad things, but they're not going to attract people in. Regarding Atheans, they should have never moved from that original shop, the second shop they had. I think it was in Allerton in Liverpool. That was a proper model train shop. They moved out to a soulless industrial estate on the outskirts of Liverpool in a unit that was quite unattractive, soulless. You went in the front door, there was all these high-end models around the walls, and there you had an oval track on the counter to test your second-hand model you bought. And it was not a modeling train experience by any means. And you will find that the shops that still sell the little bits and bobs and bits and pieces and run a little mail order on the side, and if their rent is not too high or they own the building, they could be literally there forever. Forever. There is shops like that. There's shops like that even in New York, where guys are still selling Lionel after 70 years and they're not going anywhere because they own the building or they have a cheap rent. And they expand out into other things. And they also have to understand that it's more than just, model railroaders will come into your shop. People who build Airfix and other plastic kits. And along with this, the likes of people who want ground scatter and flock for their layouts. I go to gaming shops in Games Workshop, and there's two big ones in Dublin, and including one that sells a gaming stuff, and they're not far from each other. And I buy Army Painter stuff, flock, and all that stuff. So there's a lot of cross-pollination there. So is the hobby dying? Absolutely not. It's changed. It's moved somewhere else. It's moved on to YouTube, basically. And this YouTube thing of people showing high-quality layouts, you don't have to go to exhibitions anymore. And also, the repairing thing of second hands is a wonderful aspect of the hobby all by itself. It's sad about Hattons, it's sad about Worley, but I've been hearing about the nails in the coffins all my life. It's not going to happen. So I do hope if any manufacturers out there would take this on board, what I said about a Games Workshop type modular system for the hobby. I really do, with basic, well-made logos, well painted especially, that are robust and can take a bit of abuse with not all little bits that fall off them and things like that in DC, and that basically creates a canvas from which everything can be built upon. I really do think that, like in model railroads, they had, you look at Airfix in the 70s, they produced battle boards. They were like, a D-Day invasion thing, using basic Airfix kits. But all those could be now detailed and brought up to the level of high-end, wargaming scenarios and terrain nowadays. There's nothing to stop you. As it stands in the rail model train hobby, there is nothing to entice new modelers. And that a preformed layout with a simple track system that could be easily put down and easily wired and so on, with code 100 that won't derail and cause frustration. Motors are much better today with something, a basic introduction in the hobby that shows how to clean track, how to run your locos, how to run your models, that can apply to both HO and OO, and I believe it'd be a winner overnight. I really do. Also, if you look at other countries outside the West, in Russia, a big part of the hobby there is they sell unmotorized but very highly detailed dummies of Russian diesel prototypes in a magazine. And you get the magazine, and the magazine will have all the information about the diesel or the electric locomotive, and HO scale, very nice, similar to the Atlas static models. Well painted again, flush glazing, very important. And then what they do is they fit motors into them. They either do it bespoke or buy kits that are ready to go. And that's a huge part of the hobby in Russia. I remember one time recently seeing a post where someone said the greatest satisfaction you can have is when the mailman brings a $300 logo to your house and you put it on your layout and admire it. I would disagree completely with that. And that's what's wrecking the hobby. Although there's room for everybody, the greatest satisfaction you can ever have in this hobby is building, repairing, running something for yourself. Because I can tell you something, a model running on even a simple small layout is a hell of a lot better than one sitting on a shelf in a glass cabinet. So I hope you take these comments on board. There's a lot of doom right now, and there's no reason for it. We've been here before, and no doubt we'll be here again, and the hobby will continue.